Hi guys, it's Crystal. I hope you guys are all doing well this week and that you've had a great week so far. If you're new to my channel, like I said, my name is Crystal and I do Canadian true crime or true crime with a Canadian twist from time to time. I also do international crimes. My last 4 videos actually were on Ted Bundy from the States. I do these just so that we can see the differences in how crime is treated in different areas, but also because they're points of interest to me or that they've been recommended to me. If you guys want to make some recommendations, just let me know down below and I'll see what I can do. But for the most part, I do Canadian crime. If that sounds like something that's interesting to you guys and something that you guys want to get into, please, please, please like these videos, subscribe, leave me comments. If you do choose to leave comments though, no hate, please. There's enough hate out there in the world already and we're just here to talk about things. Also, if you want to, you guys can share and hit the notification bell. That sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. I don't know if you guys ever have that problem with your phone, but I know mine. Sometimes I do have them and sometimes I don't. And if you guys are returning subscribers, you guys already know how much I love you and how thankful I am that you guys invite me into your homes whenever you possibly can. So thank you very much to all my subscribers. So we are back in Canada today. Oh, I just want to remind you guys for YouTube that these videos are for educational or entertainment purposes only. I don't mean any disrespect to any of the families or anybody else. And with cases like what we're going to talk about today, all the theories I either have found online or are my own. So nothing is concrete with this case. This case is very, very frustrating, guys. Very frustrating. Hopefully, though, we can bring some closure to this family if we get this out there enough. Also, I will link the phone numbers for Prince Edward Island's RCMP and also the Crime Stoppers phone numbers down below if you guys do have any information. So today, like I said, we are going to be in Prince Edward Island. And you guys know from the last video I talked about, which would be Mary Tuplin. That was the last time we were in PEI. PEI is one of the safest places in Canada as a province for a whole, guys. It really is one of the safest places. As of 2019, I didn't find any newer statistics. They said that the crime rate was about 1.27 per 100,000 people, and there's only about 160,536 people in the whole of PEI. So this equates to about 2 murders a year, 1-2 murders a year, depending on the year. And most of these murders are solved fairly quickly. Most of the time, like in a lot of crimes, they're either done by family members or friends, somebody that the person involved in knows. However, this particular crime is the only unsolved murder from PEI in recent years. And by that, I mean, I looked at the crimes from even 50 years ago and there's nothing unsolved. So this could be in the last 100 years even, guys. I know Mary Tuplin's case was solved, that it was supposedly Will Millman, but there are still questions lingering about that. So I wondered if maybe that didn't have something to do with it. I did say earlier this month that I might do another video on Gordon Edwin Sanderson, aka the Tofield Doe, or aka Septic Tank Sam, which is the name I knew him by. No disrespect, sorry guys, that's just what the police called him. I'm finding it a little bit hard to find more information on him. I only have little bits and pieces. So I figured I'd wait until the fall to update you guys on the case. There's a couple other ones I want to do because there's more information on Calvin Hoover. Hopefully when Evelyn Collon's killer, as we know, Luis Sierra, goes to trial, we can do a little bit more on that. And of course, Sherry Furtuck's case, guys. Originally, Greg Furtuck's trial was supposed to take place in March, but because of COVID, they've now pushed it off until September. So hopefully after that case has gone through the system, we can talk about updates at that point in time. So Byron Carr was born, actually, Byron Howard Carr, and this was on June 1st of 1952. His parents were Allison Elfie Carr, and his mother was Lois Estelle Carr. both of whom have passed, but it was actually fairly recently that both of his parents passed. In fact, his dad just died this year. I know that he had at least three brothers. One was named John, one was named Scott, and one was named Alan. Alan is also deceased, but I'm not quite sure when he died, like if it was before Byron or after him, or how he died. He also has a sister. Her name is Maida. So there seem to be 5 children in the Carr household. I don't know what birth order they were in. I found it kind of hard to find information on Byron's earlier life. I'm not sure why. It's just they more focus on what happened after. So I know that Byron was said to have a, quote, passion for books and for horses, end quote. He seemed to have shared this with his father. His father was into horses and horse racing as well. And when Byron grew up, he became a high school teacher. As far as I know, he taught the English language, of course. There wasn't a whole lot by way of anything really on his early life, but I know he was a very well-respected teacher. He seemed to have been liked by everybody, guys. There didn't seem to be anybody that ever came forward that said Byron was targeted for something or that people didn't like him. From what I read, he was very kind, he was very gentle, and he was that type of teacher that if you had him, he inspired you to want to learn. There were a number of people that left messages on Reddit that had actually said they'd been in his class, and they said that, yeah, he was one of those teachers that definitely inspired you to learn. You know, when you guys have like a crappy teacher at one point in time, I had this in grade 5. I don't know if anybody else did. That was my bad year. The next year, I felt really bad about myself going into grade 6 because I'm like, oh God, last year was so bad. But I ended up having a really good teacher who inspired me to learn, and I got straight A's in all my classes because of that. So he was one of those teachers that you just want to have the same passion for learning as he does. He must have been one of those teachers that really explored children's minds and that wanted them to learn. And as far as I know, guys, he taught at a place called Montague High School, and this would be in Charlottetown. Charlottetown is, of course, the capital of PEI. Other than that, I don't know a whole lot about Byron. Like I said, he did have a love of horses. He did have a love of teaching, of reading. He seems to have been fairly close to his family. There didn't seem to be any infighting or anything like that in the family. They never said anything at all. On the night of November 10th of 1988, Byron went out to dinner with a friend. He was back by at least 9:30. So this is the time frame we're talking about, guys. It's been 33 years, right? Almost 34. Sorry, it's been almost 33 years, I should say, since this crime happened. It was 1988. I just want you guys to remember that, and remember how different times were in 1988 as well. We're going to get into that. So he was home at about 9:30 p.m. Two other friends came over, and they had coffee with him, and they stayed at his house until about 11:45 p.m. They said that Byron received some phone calls in that point in time, but they don't know what was talked about, and they don't know who had been calling him. After they left at about midnight, Byron left his house and went downtown and met up with some other friends. They went to at least 3 bars or clubs, and these would be called Pat's, Rose and Gray, Bud's Bar, and Gentleman Jim's. These bars or clubs have all long since closed, guys. They're no longer open at this point in time. And he was driving his 1987 white Ford Tempo when he went downtown. They stayed until what appeared to be closing time at Gentleman Jim's, so about 2 o'clock, and then they went back to Byron's home. They had another drink or so, and the 2 friends left at 2:45 a.m. This would be the early morning hours of November 11th, Remembrance Day here in Canada. I know it is, I think it is like in the UK as well. Let me know down below if you guys do anything on Remembrance Day in the States, or if you have, I think you guys have a different holiday for it, but here in Canada, that's the day that we honor our veterans and fallen soldiers. So they all went back to Byron's house, and like I said, the two friends left at about 2:45. Byron left his house again at 3 a.m. He went to go and pick up a friend. I'm guessing this guy maybe didn't drive, or maybe he was too intoxicated and he needed a ride. It sounded like Byron was one of those people that would stop and help a person if they needed the help. And this would be, the friend was walking on the corner of University and Euston Street. Kind of like in the downtown area, guys. So he went and picked him up, and then he dropped him off at his boarding house, and this would be on Sydney Street. This was ostensibly, I think they would have said it was like 3:05 when Byron was done dropping him off. And this ostensibly, for this point in time, would be the last time that anybody saw Byron out and about, or Byron leaving his house. I just want you to hold on to this though, guys. I just trust me, hold on to it. I do want to also tell you that Byron lived at 24 Lapthorne Avenue in Charlottetown, which was about 5 minutes away from where the border was, guys. Like, sorry, the friend that he dropped off at the boarding house was. Give or take 5-8 minutes, somewhere in there. And I know that his house was described as a cottage style home. Some articles said it was an apartment, but it was a house that he lived at. So we're trying to do a timeline, and this is why I can't release every bit of the information right now, guys. You guys know from previous videos that I always like to do a timeline leading up to things. So this was what was known in 1988. At 9:00 a.m. on November 11th of 1988, he's a roommate of sorts. He was described as a boarder as well, so he must have just been staying there from like for a short period of time or for a little bit of time. He came home. He noted that Byron's car was in the driveway and that Byron's bedroom door was shut. Being that it was 9 a.m. and he probably knew that Byron had been out earlier, he probably just assumed Byron was sleeping. He went and got a few things, and then he left for the weekend, so he was out of the picture at that point in time. At 1:00 p.m., it's still on the 11th, guys, a friend called Byron but got no response from him. At 3:30 p.m., another friend was driving around in the area, and he passed Byron's house and noted that Byron's car was still in the driveway. At 8:00 p.m., still on November 11th, another friend came, and he actually went to Byron's house this time. He noted that the car was in the driveway. He walked up and he knocked on the door and noted that he got no response. I'm going to say that this was likely suspicious to the neighbors and probably to the friends a little bit at this point in time, because it would seem that Byron, for the neighbors to have taken note of certain things, it would seem that Byron, they were used to seeing him out and about of his house. It would seem that he probably had places to go. School, right? I'm not sure if the schools were closed at this point in time. Articles said that it was a long weekend, so maybe he had that Friday off. Just from what I know, it seems like he was a very social person, that he was out a lot. So at 8:45 p.m., the neighbors noted two suspicious, they called them suspicious, looking men lurking around Byron's house. They were suspicious enough to alert the neighbors, but at the same point in time, the neighbors did not report this to the police, and these men left. I just heard that they were acting bizarre, guys. I don't know what that meant. I'm going to assume they were out of place in the neighborhood, and so that's why the neighbors took note of it. But I'm also going to guess because they saw Byron's car in the driveway, maybe they figured he called 911. At 2:30 a.m. that night, actually I should go back, at 11 o'clock that night, 11 o'clock, which would be November 11th, police got a phone call to report a stolen vehicle. This was from a man named George Smith. Okay, I'm going to air quote it because I'm not sure if this is really his name. But he reported his car stolen, and this man lived at 154 Richmond Street, which is about 5 minutes away from Byron's address. At first, this didn't seem connected, so I want you to put a pin in it for what we discuss later on. At 2:30 a.m. in the early morning hours of November 12th, the neighbors heard Byron's dog barking a lot. This may not seem suspicious to us because you guys know from Lola, she just barks at whatever she feels like. But for Byron's dog to be barking at this point in time was very, very unusual. He was a dog that stayed quiet throughout most of the night. So this was suspicious to the neighbors. Now, I don't know if they reported this or not, because they also said that they heard a car leaving this neighborhood, at a quote, very high speed at around this point in time when they heard the dog barking. So I'm not sure if they reported that to the police or if the police found it out later on when they were canvassing around. On November 12th, which would have been the Saturday, Byron actually had a family get-together to go to. There was some type of family event that he was supposed to go to. He didn't show up. And of course, he never called anybody to let them know he was not going to show up. So this was very odd to his parents. If Byron said he was going to be someplace, he'd be there. Or he'd call if he couldn't make it. They went to his house at that point in time. And at about 11 o'clock a.m., they entered his home. They noticed that his dog was still in its kennel and that the back door, not the front door, but the back door was ajar. There was no signs of being tampered with or anything like that. It was just slightly ajar. They walked into Byron's bedroom and they found him dead, guys. So at this point in time, Byron, by doing the autopsy, police assumed that Byron died sometime between 3:30 and 9 o'clock a.m. on November 11th. They also noted that he had been strangled with a towel and stabbed in the abdomen at least once. This stabbing was actually with a long-handled knife from his own kitchen. I'm assuming that they found the knife near his body. There was also a message written on his bedroom wall in ballpoint ink that said, "I will kill again." So they figured that he was dead for about 31 hours before his body was found. And once again, this was very unusual because I think people were used to seeing people coming and going from Byron's house, or they were used to seeing Byron coming and going from his house. So there is one other piece of information that you guys do need to know about Byron Carr. This was 1988, and Byron Carr was a closeted gay man. No one knew about this as far as I can tell, or maybe people had their assumptions, but Byron never filled them in on it. I don't know how much his family knew because he was ostensibly outed by police themselves during this investigation. So you guys know, I mean, it doesn't seem that long ago to me, but like 1988 was quite some time ago. 30 plus years ago made a huge difference, right? The community, the LGBTQ plus community in Charlottetown and in PEI as a whole was very underground. There were very few people that would admit to being in same-sex relationships or looking for a same-sex partner, just because they were treated so poorly. And they didn't have a lot of communication with the police. We've talked about this in the Village murders. There was no trust between the community and the police. First of all, most of these men wouldn't admit, and women would not admit to being homosexual at this point in time. And even if police did know that they were unwilling to talk to the police because police were biased, they were racist, and they were very homophobic at this point in time. There were no programs in place that taught them how to deal with people that weren't straight. So the community was very much on edge with the police, and they were completely silent in the months that followed Byron's murder. They did not want to share information. They did not want to talk to police. Two reasons for this. Number one, they didn't want to be outed like what had been done to Byron. They just did not want that. I'm sorry if I'm saying the name Brian at all, guys. I don't think that I am. His name is Byron, Byron. And number 2, the second reason was because of the message that was left on the wall. Initially, both police and the community felt that this individual was somebody that was targeting people from the community. They felt that it could be a serial killer, and by speaking to the police, they were outing themselves as new targets for this killer. So like I said, in the days that followed, the community was very silent and would not help the police. Now, I do want to point out, though, that Byron's murder was being investigated as well as police possibly could do it. So it doesn't seem like they were as biased, the police, as maybe in other places like in Ontario, where we know there was bias and racism and homophobia until at least after the Village murders, and that would be 2018, where they admitted that they needed to work on the issues, sorry guys, they had within the police force in order to have an alliance with the community at large. Police, I also want you guys to note that in Charlottetown, for sure, the movements that we saw happening from our version of Stonewall, which would have been in 1981. If you guys remember from the Village murders, if you guys haven't seen those videos, I do urge you to watch them because it contains more information. Not about Byron's case, but about how police deal with the LGBTQ plus community. Our version of Stonewall actually happened in 1981. That was when the police came in and raided a number of bathhouses and bars and things of that nature in order to arrest and out homosexuals just on trumped up charges. These were weird, obscure laws, but that's when the police decided that they were going to do that. And that's what sparked the community as a whole, all around Canada, actually coming together and demanding their rights, demanding that they be treated as equals, like they should have been anyway, but demanding that they be seen and heard. And this was when they felt more comfortable coming out and saying, we are here, we are a community, we're the same as you. These were rights and civil liberties that should have been given to them as human beings, but this is when they came about and started to demand that they come about for them. This is also when the community turned more politicized and started to have more of a say in how things were done and how they should be dealt with within policing circles. The sensitivity training, that's what they were really pushing for at that point in time. So Byron died in 1988, but the first Pride Parade in PEI didn't even happen until 1994. So this is 6 years after Byron's death. So definitely people in PEI were still closeted, and change was slow, guys. You know from any time where change is demanded, in some areas, especially ones that are more, I don't want to say obscure, especially in areas that are less populated, change tends to come about slower. Police were able to note back in 1988 that there was no sign of forced entry into Byron's home, either in the back door or the front door, guys. There was no splintering, there was no breakage of wood, there was no broken windows, nothing like that. So police were able to learn that whoever came into Byron's house, he likely either knew and invited in or was someone he brought home, was a guest that he wanted to have there. So they figured this was someone who knew Byron in some capacity that had committed this crime. They did, unfortunately, for this period of time, they did feel like Byron went out downtown, because we do know that he went out downtown, and he must have picked somebody up. There was what they call a cruising spot. Apparently a lot of PEI didn't know that this is a cruising spot, and by cruising I mean a spot where same-sex partners can pick up another person that's either bisexual or wants to be in a same-sex relationship and have consensual casual sex with them. They said that this area was in the Queen Square area of downtown, and that's where they assumed Byron picked up this individual that killed him and brought him home. This theory doesn't make a lot of sense because the two people that were out at the bars with him, would have noted that he had picked somebody up. They would have known that, right? They went back to his house with him after. And also the friend that he picked up as well never said there was another individual in the car. So this theory didn't make sense to me, but it was what the police went on. There was not a lot by the way of evidence, guys. There were no fingerprints. There is a reason why police feel there were no fingerprints, because they did find two very good pieces of evidence. Number one, they found a pair of men's underwear. These were like bikini style underwear. You guys know, like tighty whitey style. I have seen a picture of them. They're definitely tighty whitey style underwear. And they only had, well, I should say they were marked as a medium, a man's medium. And when they were put on a mannequin with a 29.5-inch waist, they fit snugly. So police ascertained that the person that fit into these pants, these underwear, was either someone young or was somebody with a slight stature. And they knew that this person would be slender as well. So they did find underwear, and there was DNA on the underwear. However, this is 1988, guys, and we know that DNA was very much in its infancy at this point in time. We'd only started using DNA evidence in 1984, and in 88, you would need a fairly large sample to test. There were only 2 labs in Canada at that point in time that did anything by way of DNA testing, and they would be in Ontario. So there was quite a backlog, number one. Number two, it would take a while to get there. And number three, other cases would take precedence, particularly if police thought that the person they were looking for was a serial killer. There were other cases that would take precedence, right? Byron's death happened in 1988, but they still may have been testing cases from 1986. And like I said, they needed a fairly large sample. So DNA would take quite some time to come back from this. But there was DNA on the underwear. They also found a pair of socks in Byron's kitchen trash that were not Byron's, nor did they belong to any, like the boarder or anybody that should have been in Byron's house. They were also able to get DNA from the heel of these socks, and of course, they sent that off as well. Now, police believe that the killer actually wore these socks as gloves, and that's what he used to clean up the fingerprints. There were no fingerprints found in Byron's house that shouldn't have been there, right? His prints would have been there, and of course the boarder's prints would have been there, also the friends that had been there that night as well. Their prints belonged there. They didn't find any foreign prints. This is it, guys. They really didn't have anything else on the case other than to note that the message that was left, the message that said, "I will kill again," was written in handwriting that seemed fairly juvenile, guys. And it was fairly distinctive too. It was like rounded letters. I don't know if you guys ever did this, but when I was like in high school and stuff, I wrote with the loopy letters, you know what I mean? I don't know. I guess I just assumed most other people wrote like that. I want to call them bubble letters almost. And they also noted that the eyes, instead of just being marked with a dot, were actually marked with circles. So it seems either very juvenile or almost feminine in a way, because I know a lot of girls wrote like this, but I do know that there were boys that did this too. So initially the police said that this was very juvenile like writing. Sorry, guys. So that was all that police had, guys. They just had the message, the underwear, and the socks. That was it. There was nothing else out of place. I've even seen pictures, not gory ones, I didn't look at Byron's body, of what his apartment looked like. And it wasn't ransacked or anything like that, guys. It was still fairly clean and tidy. So there is that to note as well. Now, in January of 1989, a man called the police to report an attack. I don't know the specific date of it. They just said this was a couple months after Byron's death, so I'm just going to say it was in January. It could have been in early February, but I'm leaning more towards January. A man called up the police. He said that he had gone downtown and he had picked up another man, and this would be in the Queen Square area, and brought this man back home with him. They had consensual sex, and the victim, said that this man was younger than him. He placed him at about 19 years of age. He brought him home, and after they had consensual sex, he said that the man got very violent with him. The younger man, went to the kitchen, got a knife, and threatened to stab this man. And he even told the older man that he had done this before. He then took the man's wallet and left. He ran out of the place. Now, at this point in time, yeah, I know this isn't going to make a lot of sense, but at this point in time, police hesitated on saying that Byron's case was connected to this man's, even though there were similarities, and we are going to get into it more later. But the fact that he had threatened, this was a younger man who was also slight in stature. He was very slender. He went back to this guy's home. They had consensual sex, and then this man got violent with him. Particularly the part about the knife, right? He went into the man's kitchen, grabbed a knife. We know that Byron was stabbed in the abdomen, but he went in and threatened him and said he had done this before. Now, this particular man, of course, was a survivor. He did live. I don't think he was ever stabbed or anything like that. For some reason, the man was just, the younger man was just placated with grabbing the wallet. But anyway, police would not say that these two crimes were connected. They did note there were similarities, but they refused to say that they were connected. So the man in this case that was the suspect, who also has never been found, I want to point that out, appeared to be, like I said, 19 years of age. He had a slight stature. He was of average height, and he had auburn brown hair. So I don't know about what this sounds like to you guys, but to me, it sounds like there are definite connections that this guy could have been Byron's killer. But regardless, police at that point in time did not say that these two were connected. Now, this man was able to work with police. I believe they had to hypnotize him. He was able to work with police, though, and give them a sketch of this 19-year-old man. But police, once again, did not release the sketch in connection with Byron's case. Now, the sketch was released, obviously, with this victim's case, but they refused to say that this person could have been linked to Byron's case as well. So I'm just going to show you Byron's picture, guys, and a picture of the suspect in the other case. So this right here is Byron Carr. I hope you guys can see that well enough. That's what Byron would have looked like around the time of his death. And just give me 1 second, guys. Actually, so you guys can see, I don't know if that's clear enough for you guys to see the writing on the wall. And there is a picture of the suspect from the other case. Now, I just want you to remember, there's also the underwear. You can see that too. I just want you to remember that in 1989, they said that the cases, they hesitated to say that the cases were connected. They would not say that, but trust me, we'll get into it. So police also did apparently show this survivor a photographic lineup of people, and he wasn't able to pick anybody out from that. So Byron's case went cold, guys. Obviously, there was no information and nobody was talking to the police. Sometime in 2001, according to the articles, it's going to get confusing for later on, but sometime in 2001, they were able to isolate a DNA profile from the underwear, and it was uploaded into the database. Now, our database, guys, did not get started until the year 2000. So anything prior to that, if you left DNA behind, It could be uploaded later on, but this was before we started taking DNA from offenders. So it wouldn't show up from the jail system, anything that was prior to the year 2000. But in 2001, they did apparently upload this profile into our version of CODIS. I always say, it's just called the database, into our database. There you go, guys. So in 2007, police decided to reopen Byron's case. This was under a man named Brad McConnell. I just want to make sure that I'm getting it right. Yeah, Brad McConnell. And Brad McConnell really thought that they should be able to solve this case. The reason being is that it had been 19 years. People in the community were more apt to talk now because so many years had gone by and so many other changes. Plus, the initial threat of "I will kill again" didn't seem to transpire anywhere. I know there was the attack on the other man, but there haven't been any other cases linked to Byron's case since then. So police do have theories on the message, and we'll get into that right now. But they figured people might come forward at this point in time with information that they were afraid to share back then due to the message or due to relations with the police. They also revealed at this point in time a piece of information that was not released to the public back when Byron died. So 2007 and 2008 were very key moments for Byron's case when they started opening it up. And they revealed to the public that Byron's wallet had also been stolen from his home. That was a piece of evidence they kept behind, remember, so that anybody who was actually connected to the case would have known that. They didn't want to release it to the public, or else the public would have known at that point in time. So when we talked about Gordy's death, Gordy Sanderson's death, aka Septic Tank Sam, we also talked about the fact that years later they released other information, and with Evelyn Kalan too, right? They released other information in the hopes that it would jog people's memory. So see, this is why I'm really thinking that the attacks were connected at this point in time, because both of the men had their wallets stolen by this offender. But at this point in time, police were still hesitant to connect the cases. They were able, at this point in time, in 2008, which was the biggest year for them, they retested the DNA on the underwear at Byron's home. There was apparently other DNA left at the scene, guys. This is where it got really confusing to me, because I have two almost separate pieces of information, but they were included in the articles. So it's very bizarre to me. We'll get into it in a second. But they were able to isolate the DNA profile from the underwear even further, and they found out that there were two profiles that they were dealing with. One was a man's and one was a woman's. They put forward that they wanted to contact this woman because they believed that she was not involved in Byron's murder, but that she would have obviously known the killer at some point in time for them to have had sex, consensual sex. I don't know if they'd be in a relationship. It may have just been that this guy was bisexual and he was trying things out. It could have also been that this guy was a prostitute, and maybe that's how he made his money, was by having sex with whoever would pay him for it. I don't know. All I know is that police were putting things out, asking for help because they had isolated this woman's DNA. But as far as I know, they have never found this woman either. So they were able to use that. They also were able to actually improve their relations with the community at this point in time. It was proposed by the man who heads the AIDS PEI, sorry, I'm really having problems again today, guys. I talk so fast that sometimes it gets trapped in my throat. he's more of a representative for the community at large, and his name is Troy Parrott. And he actually said that Brad McConnell, who had taken over Byron's case, was, quote, doing great work to repair the relationship with the community. And he also said, quote, it certainly has improved. It certainly still has a long way to go, end quote, which makes sense. Now, Troy suggested to Brad McConnell that they actually have sensitivity training courses that should be mandatory for every new and existing police officer, so they can learn how to better deal with the community and have better communication between the two, the police force and the community at large. As far as I know, it's been implemented, guys, because Brad McConnell was very serious about doing it, but I can't say for 100% sure. As far as I know, just don't quote me. But Brad really, really wants to solve this case. He's very, I think there's two reasons for it. Number one, it's a cold case. But number two, it's the only unsolved murder in PEI. It doesn't look good. So he definitely wants to solve it. And he definitely wants to give closure to Byron's family. Byron's mother said at Byron's funeral, basically, that the only way they're ever going to get closure on this is to find out who did this and why. It's very weird because everybody in the community liked Byron. Even despite the fact that he was outed, everybody was still in support of him and everybody still liked him. So this almost seemed like an unmotivated crime. It just seemed very bizarre because no one had a beef against Byron that anybody knew about. So in September of 2008, that was when they released the information that Byron's wallet had been stolen. That's why I said 2007, 2008 were very, very big years. And they hoped that this would jog somebody's memory, but of course it didn't do anything for the case. In 2008, there was also something else very, very, very key that occurred. So from the DNA, they were able to say that this man that killed Byron was more than likely bisexual, like I said, and that he was living a high-risk lifestyle. That's what the police said at that point in time. That's why I said, could it have been possible that Byron's killer was experimenting with him? Could it have been possible that they had sex and then this man felt shame due to the prejudices of the past years, and because of this he killed Byron? Or was this guy a prostitute and maybe Byron didn't know he was, or maybe Byron didn't want to pay him? That could be another reason why the wallet was stolen and he took his revenge out. I don't know for sure. But a witness came forward that gave new information that was very helpful to the police. After Byron dropped off the boarder, his friend the boarder, at his home, he was seen by an individual who knew him talking to somebody, a young man, on a bike. Now, he was in his car at this point in time. Byron was in his car. And this was on the corner of Richmond and Prince Street. So it's close to Byron's home, right? Like I said, Richmond Street is only 5 minutes away. And remember, Richmond Street was where George Smith's car was stolen from as well at 11 o'clock the next night. 11 p.m. on the 11th. This is now 3 o'clock a.m. on the 11th. So later, but still. He said that Byron the witness, said that Byron and this person talked for a little bit. And then Byron left to go to his house in his car. And it appeared that the man on the bicycle followed Byron. He went in the same direction as Byron did. So could this have been the man? Could this have been the killer? If so, that completely blows the theory out of water that Byron picked this man up downtown. This appeared to have been somebody he had to have known at some point or knew something about, because he did stop and talk to him. If this was a prostitute, though, most prostitutes don't ride bikes. They have a specific stroll that they walk around. But if this was a prostitute, maybe it had been somebody that Byron had used their services at some point in time. But this man went off in the same direction as Byron's car. And this would be between 3:05 and 3:30. They usually say about 3 o'clock, 3:30. So this witness did come forward. Now, at first, police were really skeptical of his information, but they did give him a polygraph and he did pass. So now the timeline changed a little bit because of that. We have a witness saying they saw Byron still alive at between 3 and 3:30 a.m. In 2008 and 2012, respectively, 2 separate people came forward. These are people that did not have a connection to each other and that did not come in at the same point in time. I want you to remember that. One individual came forward in 2008 and one individual came forward in 2012. They were completely unrelated to each other. They were told by a man who they knew that he had been an accomplice to Byron Carr's murder. He was not involved directly in the murder, and there is no DNA evidence that points to 2 killers. There's only DNA evidence that points to 1. This man said that he came back with another individual, the killer, to help clean up the crime scene later on. So I'm going to call him an accomplice, guys, even though he wasn't directly involved in the murder. He was an accomplice after the fact. He did come and help this man, the killer, clean up afterwards. Specifically, he and the killer were looking to locate the underwear. They must have had some knowledge in some way about DNA, although I'm not totally sure, but also the fact that they wiped up prints would lead me to believe that they had some knowledge of the criminal system. It would also lead me to believe that it's a possibility that they knew each other from prison or that they had spent some time in jail or prison. So they said that according to these 2 sources, the accomplice confessed to them to being involved in Byron Carr's murder after the fact with the cleanup and that they went to the house twice. I'm going to put forward that these were the 2 suspicious men that were seen by the neighbors at 8:45, and then they got freaked out because the neighborhood was so, let's say, animated at that point in time, so they figured they needed to leave. And I'm going to put forward that they came back at 2:30 a.m. when they figured, on the 12th, when they figured the community was asleep and that they could do what they needed to do then. That's probably why Byron's dog was barking repetitively too, is because these people were in the house. And that's also probably why the back door was left ajar, because they just slipped out through the back so that nobody could see them. They didn't locate the underwear. So that leads me to believe they didn't have a lot of time to look. But this made police think that George Smith's stolen car was connected to Byron's case because Richmond Street, number 1, is so close to Byron's home, but also because they figured that the killer and the accomplice took the stolen car so that it wouldn't look so weird that they were just walking around. And that was the car that the neighbors heard, leaving at a high speed around the same point in time that Byron's dog was going nuts. So it would make sense. Now, police have actually looked for this George Smith and they can't find him. He's never come forward again. And all the records from that crime, from George Smith's stolen car, have been destroyed, guys. They don't exist anymore. So they can't look that up either. They don't even know, as far as I know, they don't even know what car it was, or at least nothing's ever been spoken about what car it was. So according to these 2 sources, the one from 2008 and the one from 2012, quote, this individual, as in the accomplice, had confessed to them about his involvement in the death of Byron Carr, end quote. And both statements given included details of the crime that could only be known by someone connected to the crime or involved in the crime. So these people did actually know other pieces of information that were not released that made them sound more credible, that made this accomplice sound like, yes, he definitely was there because he knew specific things that police had never told the public. So this accomplice was actually 27 at the time of Byron Carr's murder, and he was actually on recent parole. This man had a violent criminal past, and he was a suspect in the original 1988 investigation. But of course, there was no like fingerprints or anything linking him directly to the crime. Police want people to note that there is nothing that links the accomplice directly to the murder. The murder was done by one person, but the cleanup was done by two. He may have actually given the killer information too, if he was on recent parole, about fingerprints and stuff like that. He may have been a counsel to this killer. However, in 2003, about 2003, this suspect actually died. He's dead, guys. So much like Kelvin Hoover in the Christine Jessup case, this man is now dead. And police have never actually released his name. But he is dead. Police did say that if he was still alive, they would have enough evidence definitely to arrest him, but he's dead. I don't know why they won't release his name, but they haven't. According to the two sources that were involved, according to the two sources that this man confessed to, the person who did the crime brought the accomplice back to Byron's house the night of November 11th, 1988, like we said. And police believe that the two came back not once but twice, one time at 8:45 and one point in time at 2:30. They believe that when the killer brought the accomplice, that was actually when Byron was stabbed. So originally how Byron was killed was that he was just strangled by the towel. And for some reason, when the man and the accomplice came back, they further desecrated his body. Now that's when they grabbed the long-handled knife from in the kitchen and stabbed him in the abdomen for whatever reason. Number one, because they were juvenile, but number two, police also believe it was because they were frustrated at the fact that they couldn't find the underwear. They believed that these people were very immature, let's just say. And that's what led them to believe that the killer was on the young side because he was so immature. Regardless, it could have even been the accomplice that wrote the message and that stabbed Byron just to further put it off of the killer, I guess. Or it could have been the killer taking out his frustration furthermore on Byron. Now, I'm assuming they knew that he wasn't stabbed in the initial attack, in the initial part of the murder, that he was stabbed as an afterthought after he was dead, probably because there was no blood spray, right? There would be very limited spray at that point in time. The heart's not pumping, and the blood would pool a different way as well. The heart's not pumping, so there's not going to be as much blood coming out. There will be some, but not as much. Police also believe the second time, the 2:30 a.m. one, was when Byron's wallet was stolen, and that's when they believed that the message was written on the wall because the killer and the accomplice would have had more time at that point in time. Not a lot of time, but they would have had a little bit more time. So it's believed the killer and the accomplice from this must have had some type of close connection to each other in order for the killer to have trusted the accomplice enough to bring him back with him to the house to help clean up, not once, but twice. It's put forward that the two of them could have been related to each other or very good friends, but this could also have been somebody that owed the killer a favor, maybe from prison, or that maybe the killer was staying with at this point in time. They have looked into, or they are looking into, the accomplice's friends and family from that point in time to see if they can get any information, to see if the killer might be one of them, but so far they haven't come up with anything. Police now believe that the message, of course, that was written on the wall was not a threat to the community, and it wasn't actually a threat to the community at large in Charlottetown. They believe it was just written there as an act of either being so juvenile or so mentally immature that they put this out there, or that this was frustration over the fact that they couldn't find the evidence that they were looking for when they came back to clean up. Police seem to believe that the killer himself, the actual killer, was fairly young, between the ages of 15 to 25 years old. And they did then release the suspect, that I showed you guys. That's the suspect from the 1989 attack. They now, in 2000, and I'm going to say it's probably 2012 with the second guy coming forward, they now believe that the person that they're looking for from the 89 attack and Byron's murder are probably connected. They'll go so far as to say they're likely connected at this point in time. That's why they released the sketch, to see if it jogged anybody's memory. There's too many similarities for them to ignore that. The accomplice did not, however, name the killer in the conversations that he had with the two sources. In fact, the one guy, as soon as this accomplice started to tell him details of the crime, told him he didn't want to hear anymore. He was too afraid. He didn't want to know. And this source knew that the accomplice, or both the sources knew that the accomplice was, quote, a dangerous guy. And if he heard that this got out in the public, the sources didn't want this guy looking for them, end quote. So police do know, like I said, who the accomplice is, but once again, they've never released the name. I don't know why they won't release the name, because that could jog other people's memories, but they just haven't at this point in time. They haven't. So there is no physical evidence, like I said, that does directly kill or link the accomplice to the killing of Byron. It's just the cleanup and the looking for evidence and the message, etc. afterwards. Police also did say that the two sources and all of the people they have talked to with regards to the accomplice did say that he was the type of person that would never admit to doing something he didn't do. And that he would never admit to being a part of, quote, something so sensational as the Carr murder, end quote, unless he had actually been involved in it somehow. The family, it is interesting to note though too that Byron Carr's family always believed that two people were involved with the crime to some degree. So police feel, like I said, that the stolen car could have been the vehicle that the neighbors heard leaving at 2:30, but once again, they have never found George Smith, whoever he is. He's blowing in the wind, guys. They can't find him. The DNA profile from the underwear and the socks was uploaded to the database in the year 2000s, or in the early 2000s, 2001, could have been 2002. And it was actually sent to the data banks in the UK as well as to CODIS in the States. But there have been no hits thus far on either of those two areas either. Nor anything in Canada. There is no hits on the DNA profiles at this point in time. I don't even think there's been a hit on the woman's one either. Now, the samples from the crime scene itself, so not the other DNA samples, so not from the socks and not from the underwear, can no longer be tested, guys. They're far too deteriorated to be tested. This is where I had problems. I'm like, you're telling me that you uploaded a profile in 2001, but now you're telling me that there's other DNA. Who's to say what it is? I'm going to assume it's semen, but who's to say what it is? That is now too degraded. So this part's a little fuzzy for me, guys, but they are saying that the DNA is now too degraded to test. Now it could be maybe the sample is too degraded to test any further. It's too small to test, or it has been too damaged in the other testings. That could be what they meant, but now it's too degraded to test anything further. Police do believe it can be used to exclude a person because obviously you have certain markers and they wouldn't match up, or to lead them to further explore somebody who may have matching markers to it further at this point in time. But once again, nothing has come up from it. So the list of suspects was fairly short in 1988, but it's gotten a whole lot longer at this point in time. Police have actually interviewed at least 400 people in connection to this case, and this is up to date. This is up to right now. And they've actually compelled DNA samples from about 50 people with nothing coming up so far. In fact, some of the DNA samples they actually had to get warrants for, and these were from people that were in prison, so they could force them to submit samples. And of course, nothing has come up from this. And like I said to you earlier, our DNA database was formed in the year 2000. So if the killer only killed Byron and never killed anybody else, or if he killed Byron and then relocated to a country that we don't share information with unless we're asked to, that's not linked to our databases in any way, then that could be why his DNA has never shown up anywhere else. It could also be possible that he's dead or died shortly after he killed Byron, and that's why they can't say anything. But as of the year 2000, that's when we started collecting DNA from dangerous offenders, offenders who commit very violent crimes, or sexual offenders. We do it mandatorily, right? I know they do this in the States too. I think they may do it in the UK. You guys will have to let me know if they do, where they submit all DNA from dangerous violent offenders and sexual offenders into the database regardless of what they're in jail for. They'll do that now. But once again, no hits have been given. There is nothing, guys. Police did put out an appeal in October of 2018. So this is the most recent movement on the case. To find a person who had actually called them twice in 2018. This would be in July of 2018. An individual called them from a payphone at the Charlottetown Mall. He called them twice. I don't know if it was on the same day or not. But he did call them twice, and police are looking to find this individual. Of course, he didn't leave, this person, I should say, didn't leave a name or any identifying factors. They just said that they had, he was calling about Byron Carr's murder. They think that this individual has the information that they need to solve Byron's murder, so they're looking for this person. Of course, this person has not come forward at this point in time, and the dispatcher that took the calls did say that his voice sounded very urgent. So Byron's murderer has been described, I want to give it to you guys once again, as a white male who would have been between the ages of 15 to 25 years old in 1988, with a slight build, who likely lived a high-risk lifestyle at that point in time, sexually, they mean sexually, and was likely already committing lower-level petty crimes, so shoplifting, could be auto theft, simple assaults, things of that nature, vandalism, stuff like that. If this person is still alive, he would be in his early to mid 50s now. So now we're going to get into the theories. I know we talked an awful lot about this because there were so many new developments in the recent years. Number one, that Byron was killed by a high-ranking member of society. That he was killed by someone who held power within the Charlottetown community. This was an initial theory, actually, guys, that somebody put a hit out on Byron because somebody that was, of course, well-respected and high up in the community put a hit out on Byron because Byron knew sensitive information they didn't want leaked out. Now, what is interesting to note, and this is the reason why people initially believed that Byron's murder was a hit, was that the local police chief actually committed suicide in the weeks following Byron's death. So people believed that their cases were connected, that this police officer, this high-ranking police officer, ordered a hit on Byron. Now, it's possible that he and the police chief This is due to the theory, guys. This is a theory. Is it possible that maybe the two of them engaged in some type of sexual relationship, or Byron heard him talking about something, or that the police chief was a secret member of the underground community and Byron knew that? It doesn't seem to me like Byron was going to release information on anybody, but regardless, they feel that this man got hyped up and so ordered a hit, that he didn't do it himself, but that he ordered a hit. If so, he hired the sloppiest hitmen he possibly could, because a hit is very professional, guys. They don't leave evidence, they don't do anything like that. And this was very sloppy and juvenile in nature. That's why police don't believe in this theory. This theory is very, very odd. It doesn't make a lot of sense now, but at that point in time, it was a theory that people were working under. If so, it doesn't account for certain things like the message being left on the wall. And if the police chief did hire two younger individuals that were already involved in crime to do a hit on Byron, it seems very strange that they would, I don't know, that they would hire people that were so sloppy and that they would tell them to go and leave a message and things like that. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like a hit, like I said, a hit is clean. They wouldn't leave a message on your wall that says, I'm going to do this. They wouldn't strangle you with a towel. They would more than likely shoot you. And they wouldn't come back and later stab you as well, nor would they take your wallet. If the high-ranking members of society were trying to hide information that Byron had, they wouldn't use two sloppy young people. But regardless, that was a theory. It's pretty unlikely, but stranger things have happened. So theory number 2 was a hustle gone wrong. Like I said, this appeared to have been a person that Byron has talked to before, right? The cyclist. That's what we're going with, that information. So if the cyclist came back to his house, it just seems really weird that they wouldn't have known each other. Like, how would Byron have known that this man would agree to things? You know what I mean? Like, if this was a complete stranger, how would Byron have known that this man would be coming would be okay with coming with him to the house? We don't know what was said between the two of them, though. I don't know. So this could have been a hustle gone wrong, that this person was invited back to Byron's home for a sexual encounter, because remember, the sex was consensual. And that it's possible that this person could have been a male prostitute. And maybe he was under the influence of drugs at that point in time, which caused him to kill Byron. It could have been also that he wanted money for drugs. Maybe they didn't agree on a price. Maybe Byron felt that price was too high. Maybe the guy later changed his mind and wanted more money. Regardless, something happened, because the killer did, and the accomplice later came back and took Byron's wallet. It would make sense that they took Byron's wallet, wanting the money. Now, it could be possible that this guy was in a drug-induced haze, and that's why he left the evidence. And then when he kind of got his senses back later on, before maybe getting another hit, he decided that they should go back and clean up the evidence he left behind. This also could have been a person that was visiting the area that at that point in time, that didn't directly live in Canada anymore, or that didn't live in Canada at all. And he was just trying to use Byron as a source of cash. I do want to point out, though, that if this person didn't live in Canada anymore, it would make sense to as to why there was no DNA. Like, he could, if he's still alive, could live anywhere that we don't have direct jurisdiction with, right? That we don't share information with directly. We will do so if compelled to or if asked, but it could be, like a country in Asia that doesn't have access to our databases. That's not connected to us, right? The States is directly connected to us, where our land masses are connected. Could even be South America. This person could have gone on the run afterwards. So theory number 3 is hate crime / self-hatred. So a lot of people did put forward that this could have been a hate crime. But I do want to point out that most people didn't even know Byron was gay until after he was murdered, until the police actually outed him. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. How can you hate somebody? How can it be a hate crime if they don't know that this individual was gay? I would put forth more a self-hatred theory. If this guy was young and he had been taught by his parents, by his father specifically, to be homophobic, he would have been wrestling with himself. He would have felt shame afterwards, giving in to his temptation and seeing that Byron was a tempter, and then felt hatred for the fact that he was homosexual or that he was bisexual and had leanings toward men. He may have felt hatred for himself because he was taught to hate himself, not because he should have hated himself, but because he was taught by somebody influential in his life that that was not a thing that people should be doing. We know people that were raised in the 40s, 50s, 60s, some degree even in the 70s, sometimes even in the 80s, were taught that homosexuality was bad and that real men were not homosexuals. They were taught that. It's not a truism, it's not a real thing, but they were taught that by other people who were filled with hate at the gay community. So it could be that maybe Byron was his first male sexual experience, and as such, he felt ashamed of what he did afterward. Byron was the temptation that made him partake in this, so he killed Byron out of a sense of rage and self-hatred. This could be also why the crime was described as juvenile. Maybe this person didn't actually go to Byron's house thinking he would kill him, and then he did. This could also be why they left the message on the wall. And this could also be a reason why his DNA isn't in the system, guys. So maybe after that encounter with Byron, the fact that he killed him, he got really terrified. Maybe he went deeper underground if he was actually part of the community. It's possible that after he killed Byron, he could have gotten married and started a family and not killed again. It's possible, and that's why his DNA isn't in the system. So theory number 4 is actually a former student. A lot of people talked about this too, due to this person's age, right? Due to them thinking 15 to 25, right? I do want to point out that Byron was 36 when he was killed. So he was still young. It could be that this was one of his younger students, a former student who maybe had a crush on Byron for a while. And as such, you know, after he graduated, they hooked up, and maybe he was afraid that Byron would out him for some reason. There's not a real specific reason given as to why they think it might have been a former student, other than the fact that Byron let this person into his house, right? There's no sign of a break-in. So it was somebody who obviously knew where Byron lived. And if he was on a bicycle, it could be either he didn't have his license or he couldn't drive. And that's why he followed Byron to his house. Because remember, this person, the killer, is described as being a younger man. So it's possible that maybe Byron and one of his students were sexually involved. He came back to Byron's house, for some reason got angry. Maybe Byron told him that they couldn't have a relationship anymore, whatever. And this is why he killed Byron. It's also possible that he and this other person were engaged in erotic asphyxiation. And, you know, most people use their hands when they are engaging in that, but it's possible that he used the towel to strangle Byron to have a better orgasm. I'm sorry, guys. The erotic asphyxiation, you can look it up if you want to. It's basically strangling somebody in the act of sex so that your orgasm is better. That's what they say. And there are people who practice in this. David Carradine died because of autoerotic asphyxiation. He choked himself because of this. But it's possible that they could have been doing this, and then he pulled too tight, and Byron died. However, police did note that there was no evidence of this person trying to resuscitate Byron afterwards. So it does seem like it wouldn't have been a sex game. It would have been this person wanting him dead. Unless the person panicked and just left without trying to revive Byron. I don't know. Theory number 5. The last one, guys, I swear. Serial killer. Apparently, it has long been rumored that in the maritime provinces, so that would be PEI, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, could also include Newfoundland and Labrador, all along that coast, that there has been a serial killer in the provinces, going from province to province, killing people. Initially, people put out the name Bruce McArthur, because of the fact that at one point, well, first of all, because these people were strangled with a towel, and we know that that's what Bruce McArthur liked to do. He liked to strangle them. But I do want to point out that Bruce McArthur, yes, he did visit PEI, but not in 1988. He visited in 1997. So he wasn't in the area at that point in time. He would have still been sham married to his wife too. So for him to just go on a trip, although he was a traveling salesman that did sell men's underwear at one point in time, I don't think his trips were that long. Yes, I do believe he started killing way earlier than in his 50s, but he and Byron Carr would have been about the same age. He wouldn't have been younger than him. And it just doesn't seem like Bruce McArthur would know the bars and clubs to go to on his own. However, stranger things have happened, but Bruce McArthur also didn't have auburn hair, auburn brown hair, and he also wasn't of slight build, guys. He was fairly, let me see, what can I say? Husky. He was fairly husky from childhood until when he was an adult. So it's not Bruce McArthur. It's a very good theory, but it's not Bruce McArthur, guys. There was another suspect, though, that when I read about, I got super excited about, because this guy really does fit things. His name is Peter Dale McDonald, and he actually is from PEI. He did live in Charlottetown for a while, and that's where he engaged in prostitution and was an active drug addict. Now, apparently, Peter McDonald was actually a good kid until he hit about 9th grade. And then he quit school and started to engage in petty crimes. So this was going back to 1975. And remember, police do believe this man the killer, was involved in petty crimes. He did live in Charlottetown, and I believe this was during the time that Byron did, but they would have also been close to the same age, because they do say that this man is in his 60s now. He may have been even older than Byron at that point in time. So that didn't make sense as to part of it, but this man is, well, he's a killer for sure. He's a suspected serial killer. And like I said, he does have a criminal rap sheet from all the way back to 1975, that grew from petty crimes into murder. He was charged with second-degree murder and convicted of second-degree murder in 2001 in the death of a 63-year-old man named James Campbell, who was found. Sorry, guys. Dry throat. Sorry, guys. Bless me. So in the death of a 63-year-old man named James Campbell, who was found strangled in his home in Toronto. Strangulation, right? He also pled guilty to the 2000 murder in Windsor of a woman named Michelle Charest. She was a prostitute, as far as I can recall. And he was also a suspect in the murder of 3 other prostitutes in Ontario. Now, it appears he didn't start killing people. I'm so sorry, guys. It appears he didn't start killing people until he moved to Hamilton. But who can say for sure? However, since he was a violent criminal and was actually a murderer, his DNA is in the system. And of course, it doesn't link up to the DNA left on the underwear. And also, police were able to prove his alibi, that he was actually in Montreal at the time of Byron's murder. He was a really good lead. I was really excited, but not him. So, that leads us to here, guys. There's nothing further from 2018. There is nobody, as of yet, whose DNA can be linked up with the profiles created. There is nothing. But what do you guys think happened? This is where we're going to leave it for today. I just have 2 questions. Number 1, who do you think killed Byron Carr? Do you think it was the same person from the attack from 1989? I really do believe that those cases are definitely connected. Who can say for sure? But I do believe that they're definitely connected. And like I said, police have now surmised that they probably are connected. Why do you think Byron was killed? What reason? Was it a hate crime? Was it a former student? I tend to lean more towards the serial killer route or the hustler. But who can say for sure? It could have been a former student that was engaged in relations with Byron. It could have been a student he was teaching at the time too. We don't know for certain, guys. We can't say. But number 3, sorry, I said 2 questions. 3. Do you think this case will ever be solved? Police were super excited. They thought they could solve it in 2008. They thought they could solve it in 2013. They also thought that they could solve it, in 2018. But nobody's coming forward. The people that they need are coming forward. So do you think this case will be solved? I think if they did use genetic genealogy to test the profiles that they've uploaded to see if anybody matches a family tree to them, that maybe they can come up with this person. However, there is also the possibility that this man who killed Byron, this person that killed Byron, is also dead. He could have died in a car accident a couple months after doing whatever he did to the second victim. He could have died at any point in time. Who can say for sure? But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Once again, if you guys do have any information, I'm going to leave the phone numbers in the description box for you guys to call. Contact the RCMP. Like I said, they may be able to pass the information on. It would be better if you contacted the RCMP directly in PEI. That's little again. It would be better if they did that, or if you did that. I'll also leave Crime Stoppers, a link to Crime Stoppers, and also you guys can submit tips online through Crime Stoppers PEI as well. But I'll leave the phone numbers for you. Just let me know what you guys think down below. Once again, I apologize for my coughing fit, and I hope that you guys have a good week, and I will see you guys later. Bye.